Hey, you whiskey fans. When do you know your whiskey is ready to drink? I don't mean in the glass. I mean, when is the whiskey ready to be taken out of the barrel and put into some glass? It's interesting because it's very different for everybody, and there's no one correct answer. It's really subjective. I want to tell you more about how I think about it. How I've come to this philosophy is based on many others, so it's not just random. But let's dive into it. Grab a glass. Hopefully it's got something in there. Mine will soon, but let's dive into it. Many would have you believe that whiskey is ready after 13, 15, 12, 6, 8, whatever the number of years in a barrel. That it needs to have N number of hot, cold, different seasons which affect the barrel and different climates. All of this can be true, but there's a lot of marketing involved, and the reality is not that simple. At March Distilling, we've been producing whiskey for roughly 3 years now. It's just over 3 years, so from my European listeners, that means we're finally producing whiskey. And it's getting to the point where I start to taste some of my whiskeys in the barrels and try to figure out, all right, is it getting closer to something which I'm ready to put into a bottle and actually get out to the world as a whiskey? For me, there's in general 3 different criteria that I look for. And then these 3 reasons kind of get planned out in 2 phases. So for starters, I always have, when I'm making the recipe or trying to come up with a new whiskey, an idea for where I want this whiskey to go. Where it ends up, really nobody knows, but that's the fun in it. It's kind of like painting, but backwards, or if you've seen these artists which take a picture upside down, they paint it, and then they flip it, and it's something. It's kind of resembling that. I know based on too many whiskeys which I've sampled how whiskey will taste, or how different grains will make whiskey taste. And then I have to kind of patchwork this all together to put together a philosophy which I think, as a relatively new first-generation distiller, how this is all going to pan out. Also, in a relatively new climate to me, I've been living in Switzerland for about 5 years. So let's start with some things, some aromas which are no-nos, and then some of the things that we try to develop. Because it's easy to say, hey, I want it to taste or to be like this, but it's also important to know that there's some things which you don't want at all. So back here, I should have got this out already. I've got this aroma set. And it's an interesting set because I forget where one YouTuber, probably the Whiskey Vault, talked about this set or one like it. But what's important about it is you essentially get all these different whiskeys and whiskeys. You get all these samples of things you don't necessarily want in your whiskey. Now, to some level, a couple of these things are okay. It's not horrible if they're in there. But realistically, you don't want to have vinegar or vinegarization happening to your whiskeys. You want to stay away from mushroom or metallic notes. There's some things here which are just simple. You don't want too much smoke. You don't want too much spice. And this helps you gauge a little bit of what is this spice or what is this smoke. But in general, there's a bunch of stuff you just don't want. No one wants cheesy notes in their whiskey. So it's pretty clear if some of these things are in your whiskey, something is wrong. You got to look at it. But this is also very important during fermentation and distillation to make sure these things aren't coming through. If you have it in fermentation, you're going to have it in your distillation, and if you have it in your distillation, some of it's probably going to get over to the whiskey that's then going into the barrels. And although some of it might mellow or smoothen out, you're going to have some of that stuff in there. So it's stuff to keep in mind. And as I'm making the whiskeys and tasting through them, things I'm trying really hard to make sure I don't get in there. Now, that being said, this is one aspect of it. But the other aspect of it is, as I mentioned earlier, there's certain flavors that I want to bring out, that I want to have present. So one of the first whiskeys, or let's say moonshines, clear spirits that we made, that went into about 3 100-liter barrels, were a George Washington rye. Pretty standard, nothing really different or outrageous about it. It was a whiskey that I had tried quite a lot of. A lot of different distilleries had made this. and I thought it was a good place to start. I could have done the same with a bourbon, but it's easier to find rye in Europe than it is to find good quality corn. And at the time, to call it like a rye whiskey was more acceptable. Some rules have changed. It's called rye forward grain whiskey now. But essentially, I wanted to have this whiskey to help me understand how the climate of Switzerland and my production here is going to vary from what I've tasted in the States from different small distilleries like myself. So we're working this out. And while I had these 300-liter barrels, one barrel really stood out as maturing and starting to really put on some character, while the other ones, I mean, I'll be honest with you, one of those is going to be in a barrel for a long time. Maybe it's never even good to drink, but the other two have potential. One of them had a lot of potential, and I actually took that and put that into some barrels. I took a 100-liter and I broke it into 250s. In fact, let me show them to you. Come with me. So this is plus minus the site which I work. And down here, yeah, there we go, are these two lovely barrels. These barrels here are imported from Portland. They're made, I think, at a Spanish cooperage. And not to do advertisement for them, it took a long time for these barrels to get to me. But I bought them from, well, they were kind of sourced, or the middleman through the Oak Barrel Shop. What's interesting is the whiskey that went into these two barrels was the same whiskey, but they were quite different from each other. Let's taste through them. I'm actually quite a fan of the quality of these lids right here. This stuff is pretty easy to get in and out by yourself, but you still feel that there's quite a bit of suction. They're not too loose. Maybe you could have heard that, but they're not too loose to where there's just nothing happening in there. And you're not really getting a tight seal. So let's take these two and give them a quick look. So as I get back here to the setup, what's pretty interesting with these guys to take a look at is essentially same whiskey, aged in the same barrel, so same batch. And wow, this one got a whole lot more in it, but maybe you can kind of make out the color here. So way lighter. And this one really got a darker color. Now, if you might have remembered off the front of those barrels there, the aging is plus minus the same. So they're not that old or that different from each other age-wise. But I'm also going to do, and I should have probably done this all at once, but now let's make two trips back here. Essentially, I also have a whiskey which is a newer bourbon recipe which I'm working on. And that is, well, this barrel right here. So on this side, we've got a couple different size barrels here. These three are all 50s. Down there's 100. And they're all a 5-grain recipe. This bourbon has quite a bit of grain in it, but it's not quite 5. And these guys have these like wooden tops, which is fine. Very cool, but this needs a hammer to get out. You're probably thinking, completely different whiskey. Shouldn't you have cleaned out your thief? Probably, but this guy here is pretty young. It's only been in the barrel, not even 5 months. So it's really not getting that close to something which is gonna go, let's say, ready, or I'm worried about going bad. It's more the alternative. This guy, I wanna check and make sure, hey, my whiskey is aging the way it should be and is tasting the way I kind of want it to taste. So let's change the view a little bit, clean out this table, and try out these whiskeys. So back to my plus minus regular setup. Sorry, the lighting probably changed a bit. But now I've got these 3 whiskeys here. Again, I've got the bourbon. More than anything else, I'm interested to smell it for the faults, if something is wrong, or is there something I should be worried about? Is something bad with the barrel? That can happen. So I need to be aware of that. Again, it's only been in the barrel for about 5 months, so I've tested this and checked it earlier just to make sure that nothing's going awry. But awry, it's bourbon. It's got rye in it, but yeah. On the nose, it's ridiculously fresh. It's very green. It's young. It's already got a little bit of caramel, a little bit of vanilla, but still very green grass. I still get a lot, and I like to have a lot of like fresh plum, cherry, but it's too much. It's, again, very, very young, very fresh. Not bad. I'm a fan. I used, so they call it Rebel Maize, and this is a particular corn variation. It's almost like polenta, if you're aware of it. What polenta is, it's that style, but this was grown in Austria, so pretty close to where I live. Picked it up from the farmer, actually, myself. Super interesting. The nose is very different than the palate. I don't want to give too many secrets out yet. It's still really young, but I'm happy with it. It's interesting. Not going bad. Everything's fine. Nowhere close to being ready to sell, but it's growing in an interesting way. Then I've got these two here. So what's interesting is this year I plan to do a release of a particular barrel, and I won't do a blend. It will be either barrel 1 or barrel number 2. Let's smell these quickly. And while I'm going through these tastings, there's 2 other points that I want to kind of give the background on what makes this whiskey. And they do kind of play back to what we talked about at the beginning. Hey, does it matter the age, and does it matter the climate and everything? It does, but there are factors that you need to factor in. For instance, my climate here is pretty stable. It's not changing a lot. And because it's not changing a lot, I feel like I am more in line with making slightly cleaner cuts. Makes a difference of how long you want to age, and using smaller barrels, because I'm not going to get as much wood interaction as somebody with a 200-liter barrel and really warm, crazy climates. That's just not going to happen for me. In line with that, I should be aware that and you should as well if you're ever going to try this at home, some interesting new home distilling laws are changing. No one knows exactly where it's going to end up, but in the States, what's important is if you want to do this, try some. We go out to a micro distillery, go out somewhere, get some whiskeys from smaller barrels, and try them. See what you like, see what you don't like. Talk to the master distiller, see what kind of makes sense. For me, I think, of course, over oaking becomes a problem when your climate is going to allow for that. Mine won't so much. And how you distill, how clean and how dirty plays a role, because if you make a super dirty whiskey, by dirty, a lot of heads, a lot of tails, you can age that a lot longer, and you should, before it mellows out and gets kind of smooth. But if you do cleaner cuts with a smaller barrel, you're a little bit, let's say this, the whiskey will probably never get complex on its own, unless you've done some pretty weird things with the mash bill, as I've kind of played around with here. But it'll let you get to a different quality whiskey, but it'll still be a quality whiskey within its own scope. My thoughts, at least. This then brings me to finishing. Why did I choose to finish these 2 whiskeys when other ones are just in new oak? I want to give it a little bit of a pickup. And what's interesting to me is, for whatever reason, probably the barrels which I got, they didn't give a lot of sweetness. Although they were imported American oak, it didn't give me a lot of that kind of vanilla, rich character that I wanted to. And to be honest with you, I was kind of going through a port wine phase I was really into. I had tried a really good Teeling port wine whiskey. I had tried a couple other port wine finishes, and when I saw those smaller barrels were out on the market, I wanted to try them with that. By the way, everything here is at 60%. Not bad. Again, it probably needs more time. They've been in the port wine for around 6 months. This is also important to note. I said more time in 6 months, 6 months finished. Larger distilleries will tell you, hey, 3 months, 2 months, whatever. Yeah, maybe that's the case. And maybe they had really wet barrels. Wet barrel is when you get a barrel from a cooperage, from a winery, from whatever, they usually leave a little bit of wine in there, or whatever, spirits, to kind of make sure that the barrel doesn't dry out. If it dries out, you can kind of move it back and forward. It starts to creak. Of course, it's not watertight anymore. And that means you're going to lose a lot of whiskey. So in transportation, normally there's a decent amount, about like they say a gallon or a few liters, 3.8 liters of liquid in that barrel to make sure that it doesn't dry out before you can fill it with some whiskey. However, there's mixed philosophies on this. Many people are very avidly against it and say you should dry out your barrel so you have only the flavor of the whiskey or whatever spirit was in before. The whiskey is only taking that influence from the wood itself. The larger distilleries say, I don't have that time, energy, or efforts available to make sure all my barrels are dumped before I fill them. I tried to dump them, but then I'm filling them. And other places just say, hey, I'm going to fill them as I have them. Love it or hate it, this is the reality of it. And the further reality of it is you probably will never know exactly what situation the whiskey that you love or hate fell under. Unless you're working with a really small distillery who can tell you. But with the 50 liters right now, the way they tasted, one of them, maybe you can tell by the color, was pretty dry. And the other one had a little bit more rum in there. Now, what's interesting is when I taste it, I actually prefer the one which is a little bit drier on the rum side. But the one which is the rum finish, I've heard reviews or people which have given this a taste, which love the color, super impressed by how dark it is, and it's way sweeter. And you can tell right away, like there's a major difference between the two. The purist will probably go this way, and the average casual drinker that likes sweet, like who doesn't, will probably go this way. I mean, damn, that's good. Again, totally different. I'm much happier to pull this one out first because it's so sweet. It's almost overpoweringly sweet. And this one here is so much more mild and so much more, let's say, still maturing and aging and hasn't been overwhelmed by the sweetness. Again, the flavors we talked about at the beginning, that I'm happy to leave this one a lot longer versus this one. I don't know what's going to happen to it. Now, the final consideration is, especially if you're a larger distillery, which needs to be making some product to sell, to keep money afloat. This is kind of like a full-time legit hobby of mine that I do alongside working. I mean, it's nice to make more money to sell some whiskey, but I'm under no pressure to sell anything until it's really how I like it. And the way I kind of think about it is, if I was stuck on an island and I only had this whiskey to drink for the rest of my life, whatever I'm bringing out should make me very happy on this island for the rest of my life. And if it doesn't meet that criteria, I got to find a more interesting way to finagle it, to make it like that. But it's going to be interesting. Again, I'm not fully in love with this either, but it's going somewhere. And I think probably in the latter half of the year, after the summer, where I will get a few degrees warmer, maybe it's something. Maybe it's not. But what's very important is I don't think year, I don't think finish, I don't think alone, climate. There's so many factors that make a whiskey ready to drink. And I think what's interesting on top of that is you are tasting this as intended by the blender or as the master distiller, whoever picked out that barrel, or that independent bottler that found something they think is amazing and they want to bring it to you. So appreciate it in every case, especially if you're working with or around a new, smaller distillery. What they're doing is not right. It's not wrong. It's their interpretation of what is a ready-to-go-to-market whiskey. Only thing I'm against is don't just age your whiskey 3 years and sell it just because. And don't then go do marketing saying it's just as good because of blah, 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 because that. And I know I'm never going to get the bigger distilleries to change, but I'm happy to see that many of them are under their own financial struggles and barrel shortages and drop their age statements anyway. And in doing this, they're getting a lot of hate from the market saying, hey, you told me for years, you marketed forever that age is super important and that's just a sign of quality. And now you're telling me, age isn't important, get rid of it. Well, stick to one story and market that the right way. So consumers and people who love your whiskey and your spirit aren't confused. So to cap this all together, it's not age, it's not climate, it's not the barrels, it's not the spirit. It's a combination of all those things crafted together with passion, with excitement, and this kind of interpretation that I might like and you might hate. but we're in this journey and this experience together. So I hope you found this interesting. This is kind of something I do or talk about a lot with people who come and visit me here and try my production, try my new makes, try some of the stuff I'm aging. And it's always interesting to hear other people's opinions and interpretations on what characters they see as finished. Do they like young? They can't stand young whiskeys? And factoring this into, okay, from my perspective, when do I have a product that's ready to take out? So if you've got any thoughts, feelings, emotions about anything we just discussed here, please let me know. I'd love to hear it. And we'll probably do another video very soon, similar to this one, where we just do some samples of tasting through different ABVs, because I'm not too certain I'm going to release this at 60. It's probably a little bit less than that, but again, because my climate doesn't change, I don't have really crazy humidity. I'm probably at 59, 60% ABV. It hasn't dipped so much. But I think at 60, it's a bit high, so maybe we play around next time and do some tasting and figure out what ABV this will get bottled at. Cheers to you. I hope you like this rant. And yeah, see you next time.